Every time we went to a tasting room in California, there were two wines. It was Cabernet Sauvignon and Chardonnay, which to me became chocolate and vanilla. Because I didn't know anything about anything, I started to think, well, there must be an opportunity here.
Right.
We're like a country that has a Chinese restaurant and a French restaurant and nothing else.
Welcome to the Blackberry Podcast, where we share stories, wisdom, and insight from the amazing people we get to meet and collaborate with at Blackberry Farm. I'm Sarah Chabot, hosting alongside Mary Celeste Beall, proprietor of Blackberry Farm and Blackberry Mountain. Our guest today is a longtime and cherished friend of Blackberry and one of the true architects of modern American wine, John Alban. If you're a wine person, you probably know Alban wines. But if you haven't had the pleasure and you're a wine drinker or you're wine curious, we can assure you this is required tasting. John played a pivotal role in bringing Rhône wine production to the U.S. soil. And his vineyard on the central coast of California is ground zero for the Viognier variety in the U.S. He's a visionary with a great origin story that you're going to hear today. So pour yourself a glass and enjoy our chat with John, who was at Blackberry Farm for our 16th annual Hospice du Rhône, a celebration of Rhône wine and the culture John helped create. Listeners, Mr. John Alban. Welcome to the Blackberry Podcast. John, we're so excited to have you. John Alban. Incredible winemaker, legendary in that industry, but also kind of legendary in the Blackberry story as well, or at least from my perspective. I think I've been seeing your bottles and hearing your stories from Sam, Belle, Andy, Mary Celeste for years now. So I'm excited to dive in. But we all have a glass here. What are we drinking?
Some wild stuff. It's fun comparison that a gentleman you know real well, Andy Chabot, concocted for us. Two Chardonnays.
Uh-huh.
One is a white Burgundy, which of course is the epicenter for Chardonnay on this planet. And then the other is a wine from the Jura, which historically has worked with ancient varieties.
Oh, okay.
Things like Sauvignon, not Sauvignon, Vert, which I think is a descendant of Guace, which is a very ancient white variety. Okay. And if I haven't bored the pants off of you yet, wait to see what's coming next. But, then, as if that isn't weird enough, this producer, who I never heard of before, is working with Chardonnay. So you have two Chardonnays, but they could not be more different. This is kept in barrels and intentionally not topped. So wine steadily evaporates out of a barrel, and it's supposed to. But if you want to keep it fresh, you add wine to keep filling it up because you don't want that space in there. And what happens if you leave the space in there is that things start to grow on top of it. Oh. And that wine, they intentionally let stuff grow on top of it, what's called a floor yeast. And I've never known why they call it a floor yeast because it grows on top. It should be a ceiling yeast or a roof yeast. It shouldn't be a floor yeast. But in any case, it makes a film and you taste what is clearly oxidized wine. And it's fun for me because that immediately evokes in people. So you're saying it's spoiled. And spoilage is such an interesting concept because, of course, wine, the white Burgundy, is arguably spoiled grape juice. It was grape juice that was allowed to go through a chemical transformation. Yeah. And, of course, if you left that wine untopped long enough, it would turn into vinegar. Which is a spoilage process too. Milk turning into cheese. It gets very hard to say what's spoiled. So the bottom line to me is, if you like that, it's not spoiled. And if you don't like that, we have white Burgundy.
Right. Okay. Well, that's just the perfect beginning to this conversation. Everybody's gotten like a great first lesson on wine, but let's start back in your story. I feel like Mary Celeste and I have heard it a lot over dinners and things like that, but we want to tell the folks listening in really what started your love of wine. Like we want to go way back to that.
I'll make you a deal.
Okay.
I'll go way back and I'll tell you this story that I've told a beautiful many times. But since we're here today and it's just us, I'm going to, for the first time ever, if you indulge me, tell you what I think the story in fact means to me.
Amazing.
Let's hear it.
Perfect.
All right. So first, the story. My father was a physician who was a very early proponent of what he believed were potential health benefits of wine. He also loved wine, and he would be the first to tell you they didn't know anything about wine. And his interest started in the late 50s, and in America in the 50s. Nobody drank wine. And he came from a very poor family, so he certainly wasn't exposed to wine growing up. By the 60s, he was in a position where he could prescribe wine post-operatively. He was probably one of the first physicians.
Do they still allow that?
I don't know if it's allowed. It was also a different
It'd
era.
be the one thing I wouldn't have to pay for. I
Yeah.
wouldn't have to go to the pharmacy. Damn it.
So he had it delivered right to the recovery room at the hospital.
Okay, all of this
measured
is
amount.
sounding very good.
Wait, where was this? California?
Southern
Okay.
California.
Okay.
And you won't be surprised to hear, even just from that story, that my dad was the doctor that everybody fell in love with.
Right.
And he was that person who was doing the thing he was put on this planet to do.
Yeah.
He was a doctor in his soul, not just as a profession. Remarkable man who everyone fell in love with. And so his patients always wanted to send him a thank you. And the thank you to send became very obvious to everyone, which was a bottle or sometimes bottles of wine. And my dad would come home each weekend with a mix of wines that he knew nothing about. And he and I were best friends. So from about the age of 8, I would kind of hang out with him on the weekend when he cataloged what these different wines were. And you can picture Mary Celeste, if I gave you 3 bottles of wine you never heard of, if I wasn't here and you had this wine from the Jura, you might look up, what is it?
But like, where did you look up?
We had a Hugh Johnson's World Atlas of Wine.
Okay. Yeah.
And I remember from a young age cataloging these things. And then when we went on vacations, if there was a tasting room somewhere or a winery, my dad liked to visit. He was really interested in learning anything and everything he could about wine. Very quickly, it was clear to me, by this point I would have been about 10 years old, that every time we went to a tasting room in California, there were 2 wines. It was Cabernet Sauvignon and Chardonnay, which to me became chocolate and vanilla.
Right.
2 great flavors. There's a reason everybody has chocolate and vanilla.
Right.
But then I would help my dad catalog these wines from all over the world. No exaggeration. Hundreds and hundreds of grape varieties. And in a very simple way, because I didn't know anything about anything, I started to think as I got older and older, well, there must be an opportunity here.
Right.
We're like a country that has a Chinese restaurant and a French restaurant and nothing else.
Right. There's
And
got to be more.
There's got to be more. Both wonderful foods.
Right.
But just as diversity and variety is the spice of life and food, it's completely true of wine. Wine is a food as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
And no matter how much I love something, I don't want to drink the same thing every night or even every week. And I had this very simple, innocent, ignorant idea that I could introduce something new. So by the time I was 17, I thought if I could figure out how to make a living in the wine trade, I would go for it. You also need to know that my father was convinced, as I had been up until the age of 17, that I was going to become a doctor, just like him.
Follow in his footsteps.
Interesting.
Yes. I used to joke that my father's very liberal, and he felt like I could go to any American medical school I wanted to. That was it. No other decisions.
No other interest. It's American medical
So
school.
many choices.
That's right. Overwhelming.
Right.
So you can imagine the challenge of rebuking this one idea that is totally quantifiable and secure. I could go to a cocktail party, and if my parents' friend said, so what are you doing next? Oh, next I'll have my residency. Everything is charted out for you. If I were to tell them, I'm thinking I'll start a winery, it would trigger so many questions that I didn't have any answers to. So I kept that very much under my lid. And then the next goofy thing that happened was, as I went further down this path of pre-med and college and trying to figure out how I might study wine, this was long enough ago that talking about going to wine school, I would joke. I told my kids when they were growing up, I said, where did you go to school? I said, I went to clown school. Because to me, telling people I was going to study winemaking would be like the proverbial joke of majoring in basket weaving. To me, it sounded exactly the same.
Right.
Totally embarrassing and ridiculous. So I kept that under my lid and just kept charting away. I thought I'm going to need to know a lot of hard science anyways. So the pre-med path,
Let's go ahead
biology,
and do that. Yeah.
microbiology, all organic chemistry, all sounded like it made sense in this crazy career path.
You're still keeping this under wraps.
So under wraps that when I finally decided, as I was starting my senior year in college, and it was going to be time to take the MCAT, which is a standardized test you have to take for medical school,
Right.
then go through all the applying to medical. It was going to become pretty clear that I wasn't going to do any of that. So I sat down with my dad to explain that to him, and he had the most unanticipated response to that, which is he said to me, "You're probably anxious and feel like you may not get admitted to medical school." And I thought, no, that is the last thing I was thinking.
I feel comfortable.
What I'm thinking is what I'm telling you, which is I don't want to go to medical school. So not getting in wouldn't really matter. And my dad said, well, how about I make you a deal? I'm all ears. He said, you get into medical school and I'll give you a 1-month full expenses paid trip anywhere in the world. So I thought, wow, that would launch my studies in Europe of wine and these different varieties that we don't have in the United States that I'm very curious about. Why not? In that moment, and for years after that moment, I couldn't really even explain what I was doing. So, because I wasn't starting a winery that had anything to do with any winery in the United States.
Right. There wasn't anything to compare to.
Right.
I had told him that I was going to introduce, for example, Viognier into the United States. I told him, I shared with him what this was.
Thank you for doing that, John.
Oh, you're very welcome. We were at dinner one night, and my dad turns to the server, very nice gal who also offered wines from a wine list that was written by some corporation that, of course, just wanted to sell cheap vodka to their well, had no interest in wine, and she knew nothing about wine. And my dad turns to her at one point and said, excuse me, you work with wine? She said, have you ever heard of Viognier? I was like, Dad, don't do this. She said, no, sir. He turned to me and goes, see? I thought, well, how would she have heard of Viognier when I just told you there is no Viognier in America
Right.
and it's going extinct? And it just became, I offer that story just because there was no way to explain it. And you know what? When it all came true and worked, I realized he was right. It was insane. There was no reason to believe this was ever going to work out. I look back on it now. Obviously, I know infinitely more about this than I did when I was 23 years old and explaining I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I would have me today would have told me then,
don't do this.
Won't work.
Yeah.
Ain't going to happen. Because I now see all the ways it could have gone wrong.
You mentioned the waitress didn't know anything about Viognier. A lot of people didn't know about it.
Oh.
I mean, like it was almost extinct, right?
Very close to it. That's right.
Yeah.
And in decline.
Yeah. Almost extinct. It wasn't even in America. Let's be clear.
There was none in America.
Yes.
And there were about, depending on how you document it, it's comfortable to say there were fewer than 40 acres left in the world, and probably fewer than 25 at that point.
And this is Viognier is specifically the varietal of grape.
The white grape that goes also by the appellation name of Condria.
So, but when did you first discover the variety?
So my closest pal in wine school, as we got closer and closer, we discovered that our birthdays are 2 days apart. And they were very close to the end of finals. So we said, hey, to celebrate our last final, let's go out to dinner together, celebrate our birthdays. And he said, and I want each of us to bring a bottle of wine we're sure the others never had.
Oh.
And he brought a bottle of Condria, which I had never heard of and never had. And for a funny reason,
we owe him. I mean,
I owe him big.
The world.
And he's still a very close friend.
Yeah.
And he reminds me that I owe him. So
Case here, please.
He mistakenly thought that it was a very inexpensive bottle of wine. And that was a big plus because he sheepishly said, I know you're bringing something kind of pricey. This is cheap, but I think you're going to like it. And I was really tantalized by that. And I stuck my nose in the glass and it has all these heady aromatics, as you know, and that's the hallmark of something that isn't cheap. But then the uniqueness of Viognier, it's the only grape on earth that combines those aromatics like a Gewürztraminer or a Muscat, something that jumps right out of your glass, with texture, with weight, without any sugar. So, of course, since it's the only grape on earth that can achieve that, and I'd never had it before, I was blown away. And thinking it was cheap, I really thought, I'm going to give the Gallo brothers a run for their money. I'm going to make the world's greatest cheap white wine out of whatever the heck this is. I got to the research library the next day. I couldn't sleep. And this is another wonderful turn of events. At that point in time, there were about 12 sentences that had been published about Condrieu. And I thought, dear Lord, I've read all 12. I'm like an expert. I might be the foremost expert. All I have to do is stay contemporary now. I mean, it was really lovely.
Yeah.
One of the first sentences is that it's a rare and very expensive white wine.
Where did your friend pick this bottle up?
That's the other funny part. I said to him after I learned more about it, why did you think this was cheap? He said, well, I worked all summer and it was a very prominent wine shop. He was from Virginia, Washington, D.C. area. Maryland. And he had worked all summer, and he's just a beautiful human being and just someone you immediately fall in love with and want to be around. And his employer felt that way. So when he was leaving for wine school, he gave him a mixed case of wine.
Yeah.
I'm not going to name the wine shop because in the wine world, it's quite renowned. And the gentleman the proprietor, is also a renowned cheapskate, which is important. Because in this mixed case of wine, the only thing Dan got 2 bottles of was the Condrieu. So he concluded that must be the cheapest wine in the box. In fact, it was the wine that was the most difficult to sell. Nobody wanted it. So the guy gave it to him.
Even though it was probably the most expensive in the box.
It was probably one of the most expensive bottles. That's right. But at that time, I don't want to say you couldn't give it away because he could. That's how he got rid of it. He gave it away, literally. And a year later, I was living in the little village of Condrieu. And I mean, little.
Yeah.
And eventually talked someone into letting me study there, an apprentice. Gave me access to cuttings. Grapevines are propagated from grapevines.
Right.
So if you want to grow a grapevine that doesn't exist in the United States,
you got to have a cutting.
You do. And there's no way to get a cutting because you don't have a grapevine to get a cutting from. So that was a big part of the puzzle. And
so you got the cuttings. In what was that like? Like, do you just like wrap that up in a plastic bag and bring it over, or?
Well, that's called smuggling.
Oh, okay.
So you don't do that.
Okay.
No.
And when you're young, you might look into what does it take to get a permit to get process this through the Department of Food and Agriculture. And when you're 23 years old and you hear that that's going to take about 8 to 12 years, at 23, 8 to 12 years is, you said forever.
Right.
I think you just said I'll be dead when I get these.
Yeah.
So I had developed a wonderful skill at Fresno State, which was a friend taught me how to make beautiful wreaths out of dormant grapevine cuttings.
Oh, I like the way this
Weave
is
them
going.
together. You can put yarn on them. You can put ribbons. You can put bells. You can glue acorns or pine cones. Sky's the limit.
Right.
So I made wreaths for my mother and my sisters.
All the friends back home.
And I put them right on the tray in front of customs when they said, do you have anything to declare? I said, I bought some perfume for my mom. I made these wreaths for my sisters. That's it. Welcome home.
Oh my gosh, that is awesome.
Then you go to a refrigerator as fast as you can and put those wreaths, get some moisture, get them refrigerated.
Okay, so from the time of cutting to the making of the wreaths to getting it into refrigeration, what was your timeline?
So that's a great question because nobody really knows. What we know is that the probability of success in propagating these buds is diminishing with each moment that they're not refrigerated and moistened. So it's like, how long can you keep a turtle out of water or a fish out of water? It varies. So I went to what at the time, Charles de Gaulle Airport. I had a mini fridge. I had cheap cooler and I had ice, and I kept them like that right up until I was going to check into my flight. And I had a direct flight to LAX from Charles de Gaulle. So I knew that was going to be about 11 hours. And I had a friend who was going to pick me up at the airport with a cooler, with ice, and be an accomplice, and could really be a cellmate if it came to that, which would be nice.
That's
I know
good. You picked that one
somebody.
up early. Yeah.
So I figured really a greater fear to me than how long they were going to be out of cold storage was, were they just going to be confiscated?
Mm-hmm.
Does a person look at this and see a wreath, or do they see illegal propagatable plant material?
Mm.
And that had me terrified, because I did think, I'm investing so much in this. I've used my one trip to France, all expenses paid,
Right.
and I don't know that I'm ever going to find myself with these cuttings. And then I'm going to graft them. That's going to take me a year. And then it may be that none of them live.
Oh.
And so I'd already done all kinds of projections of, okay, if 10% survive and they grow this long, then each one would give me like 5 viable buds for next year. And then that would give me potentially X number of. I realized that at best, I would be spending the next 7 years of my life in a greenhouse propagating sticks.
And had you already sort of identified the land that you were, or were you just thinking greenhouse at this point?
I knew that it was going to take a long time to propagate them.
Uh-huh.
I knew it was going to take a long time for me to learn how to make wine. I was just out of school.
Right.
I needed to get a job. I needed experience. I was going to need to propagate these. And I didn't really know exactly where I wanted to plant them.
Mhm.
So I had 7 years to propagate material, get more information, and start to think about where this should take place.
I mean, the 7 years in a way gave you time to figure everything else out.
It gave me time to figure a lot out.
Yeah.
That needed to be figured out anyways.
Right.
And really, if I had a magic wand and I could have had hundreds of thousands of sticks that were ready to plant the moment I got
Mhm.
here, I think it would have gone much worse for me, because the single biggest factor in the quality of a bottle of wine is the quality of the grapes that are used for that. And the single biggest factor in the quality of the grapes is the climate they're grown in. Then the soil. Everybody talks about soil, and that's because by the time you get to that level, the climate's locked in. So you change soils across a piece of property or across a region, but the climate doesn't change that much. And without getting too complicated, I had evaluated a lot of meteorological information while I was living and working in the Rhône Valley, where these cuttings came from originally, to try to figure out. I looked at it in a very unique way, because historically people look at what's the average of this area, what's happening climate-wise in Condria.
Right.
But what I did was I looked at that and then said, but now let's look at the great vintages. What's different about them compared to the average? Why not look for a place, if you could, where the great vintages
Where it was
are the
consistent.
average
Yeah.
instead of the anomaly?
Right.
And as I started to zero in on that, there were a number of areas that I thought had promise. And since I had to propagate the cuttings, I found people who would let me graft their vines in different places and simultaneously get hard information about grape composition and potential wine quality while making more sticks. So using a huge amount of meteorological information, I got even more excited. And this I had doped out while I was apprenticing in France. I wasn't going to commit to this idea until I really felt every box was ticked saying, this can work.
Right.
And when you look at what's unusual about the great vintages, this is not earth-shaking information today, but it was really cutting-edge information in its time. It's that the great vintages, for the most part, are unusually warm late in the summer. So if the average temperature of the last 2 weeks of September in a wine grape growing area is in the mid-60s, but then in a particular year, for whatever reason, goes into the high 70s or 80s, that almost always portends a great vintage. And that's when I got very excited, because being a native Californian,
You got those
This
warmer
is a
tempers.
common event in
Mhm.
certain parts of California. In fact, the part of California I'm in, because I believed so much in this effect, we have multiple names for it. There's Santa Ana's,
Mhm.
we have Indian Summer, we have Sundowners, we have El Diablo. We have multiple names, the same way Eskimos have so many names for snow
Right.
because they know they're getting it.
Mm.
We have multiple names for this phenomenon. You can count on it. Got me crazy excited about the prospect. And the areas I looked at were the multiple east-west valleys in California where the ocean currents
Yeah.
can come in and create a very strong diurnal effect,
Mhm.
cooling. And I looked at a number of them. The two most renowned ones today, three. One would be where the Templeton Gap in Paso Robles area,
Mm.
which now is a huge Rhone producing area.
Right.
The Edna Valley, which I really thought was the least promising of the three that I was targeting,
Mm.
and is where I am.
Right.
So
I was
shows,
gonna
don't be so sure.
say. Right.
And the third was an area that didn't have a name at the time, but we now refer to it as the Santa Rita Hills.
Mhm.
That's where some of the most famous California Rhones are produced from there. I just really got blown away by what was happening with the little pockets of vines I had in the Edna Valley on other people's property, and thought I would stake my claim there if I could find the right piece of land.
Can we just pause for a minute to think how incredible it is that this varietal did not exist in America? And you just mentioned 3 regions where Rhone varietals, I know we're talking about Viognier specifically at first, but that the Rhone varietals are thriving. It's incredible.
It's surreal for me. Yes, it is surreal for me, and that it transformed what California does with wine. And you're right. This story has all been using Viognier as the example. Viognier was Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. It just led the way for all the other reindeer, who I think really did more of the pulling anyways. And the other Rhone varieties have done more of the pulling in terms of pulling Rhones as a category into California prominence with wine. But Viognier sparked it all.
Viognier sparked it, and then not only were you like such a pioneer in bringing this to the U.S., there's also this great story behind Hospice du Rhône, which is why you are here at Blackberry today. And I'm going to ask questions of both of you because there is this sort of intertwining of at least my perspective of the wine program at Blackberry that is very story driven. Sam loved, not only just great quality wine, but small family focused producers, and that had a story to tell. And obviously we've sat here and heard a lot about yours. But that intertwining sort of came together with Sam showing up at your door and dropping off some brochures and trying to convince you to bring your wine to Tennessee.
Yes, and unfortunately I wasn't there. So he left these materials. This is at a time when Sam was, and Mary Celeste would know more about the timeline, but Sam was just introducing kind of these culinary weekends where he was pairing a winery with a guest chef and doing a multi-day tasting that was both a cooking class with the guest chef and a couple meals paired with the guest winery and courses. And it was, so my original invitation to Blackberry was to do one of those culinary weekends, which was super fun. It took a little bit because while you heard from the previous story, I am open-minded to absurdity. But this person I never met before who was trying to tell me why I should go to a dry county in Tennessee.
Right.
To pour wine.
Right.
I was having a hard time figuring that one out at first.
Right.
And a county that probably wasn't already distributing your wine.
No distribution in the
More
whole state of
paperwork
Tennessee.
for you to fill out.
Et cetera,
I
et
know what
cetera.
he said. He said, "Don't worry, I've friends with all the distributors. It'll come straight to Blackberry. We'll make it easy on you.
He also said, you know, some of your friends have been here. You should call them. And he gave me a few names of chefs and winemakers who had been here. And to a person, they said, we can tell you a lot about it, but before we do, just go. You'll be crazy if you don't go. And it really stuck with me because now with Hospice du Rhône and 16 events here and countless guest wineries that I've invited, I start with, you should just say yes to what I'm about to propose, but it's going to take a little bit for you to understand why. Now it doesn't.
Yeah,
Everyone
right.
around the world knows if you get an invitation to Blackberry, you say yes.
Well, we're so glad you said yes.
Me too.
So that
Beyond
was-
words.
So Sam convinced you by fax and phone
To
to
come
get
here.
on a plane, travel across the country to Tennessee. And what did you think?
More importantly, it's what my wife Lorraine thought.
There you go.
We had a hard time getting here. We've only had trouble getting here twice. The first time we came here and then day before yesterday. And we've always joked, thank God the one time we missed a night here was the very first night that we should have been here because we had no idea what we were missing. So it wasn't that tough.
Right.
We finally made it here. Beautiful accommodations in the Holly Glades. And we went to the opening dinner. And we are 20 minutes into our first event here. We met Sam, and I think you came by also on the chairs in front of the main house, had a glass of wine, talked for a while. We went to that dinner, and I don't think I had even presented the first wine. Lorraine put her arm around me, and she said, promise me something. I said, I'll promise you anything. Promise me you'll bring me back here one day.
Oh.
I said, baby, we only just got here. You're going to be back here tomorrow morning. She said, don't be silly, you. Listen to what I'm saying. I said, I promise you, I'll bring you back to Blackberry Farm. And then we had a wonderful time, wonderful connection with the Bealls. And about, to my recollection, I'm terrible with dates and time frames, 3-4 years later, Sam called me and said, we had always planned to make these culinary weekends a singular event. We do one winery, one chef, and we move on to the next one. It makes perfect sense to me. He said, but we are now, and I think it was their 5th. That's my recollection. But it was a milestone thing, whether it was 5 years of doing this or Sam said, but this is our 5th, and we decided what we're going to do to celebrate the milestone is have a best of. So it means we can bring back the people, whoever we want, and we'd like to bring you back. Excellent. I can fulfill my promise to Lorraine.
Right.
Perfect.
And so now, like 16 years later, there have been 16 Hospice du Rhônes here.
Again, I thought it was a singular event. I thought, we'll do this, be a lot of fun, be unique for Blackberry, be unique for us.
Yeah.
Yay. The very first night, Sam came over to me and said, I probably should have talked to you about this earlier, but a lot of people are asking, what are the dates of next year's event? The dates of next year's event. We haven't even done this year's event.
Right.
And in a very Sam way, he had this vision of a growing, perpetuating cornerstone event here. I did not see that coming, but it's been incredible. Blackberry is wonderfully inspirational to anyone who is receptive to being inspired. And it's to me astounding because it can be architectural. It can be lifestyle related, whether it's yoga or different things. It can be food or wine or food and wine. Everything that you've done here, you've done it with an artistry. You've never said that, oh, we need a building here. It really shows that you've asked, yeah, but what should that building be? Why should that building be like that? And why should it be oriented on that site that way? You've clearly thought everything through, and you can translate that to any walk of life. So simply in my life, I'm blessed with certain soil types. Why that variety on that soil? And how do you orient it? And how do you space it? And thinking everything from the roots up. And with that, giving it the greatest opportunity to be both beautiful and authentic. The buildings here look like they belong here. Alban Vineyards worked because those varieties were matched to that place. We didn't try to force something into it. And what I just remind myself all the time of from Blackberry is you've created your own cuisine, this Foothills cuisine, that of course is inspired by other cuisines and cooking that you've experienced all over the world. But then you've applied those lessons to your own gifts. And that's what I love to remind myself all the time about Blackberry is celebrate your own gifts. Don't try to be the Ritz-Carlton in Half Moon Bay is beautiful. Can't build it here because you don't have a Half Moon Bay to start with. Celebrating your unique beauty and then framing it authentically and presenting it with joy and hospitality. It's just a beautiful, beautiful way to embrace what Mother Nature bestowed on you.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And I think that living here, I feel so fortunate that my life is enriched in so many ways by people that I get to sit down with on a Monday night and have a glass of wine with, John Albans of the world, who are bringing their story and their passion and their expertise and their interest in what we're doing. You know, it's so fun and it brings out a part of Blackberry. It enhances what we're doing when we can bring someone else into the mix, whether it's for a few nights or for 15 years in a row, 16 years in a row. So I love that. And I also want to say, you know, Sam was very proud of what Blackberry became in his lifetime. But so much of what he was proud of was that we really, truly were being authentic to this place, this land, and this region. And having spent so much time in California with him before we came back and lived here, you know, full time, he was so inspired by California. I mean, who can't be inspired by the beauty and the bounty of California? But he came back and said, okay, these are things I can apply, but then these are things that our neighbors are already doing, and we just need to help inspire them to know how important their craft is. And so I think there's a balance of us celebrating what's here, but also having people like you who recognize what's here also and celebrating it with us. So thank you so much, John, for all you've done for Blackberry and helping us, you know, bring our story to life, but also, you know, sharing your passion and talent. And again, you know, I'm a huge Viognier fan and a Rhône fan. So just on behalf of all of us Tennessee and American wine drinkers that love the Rhône wines, we owe you big time. Thank you.
Thank you. And you're very welcome.
Thanks, John. Let's get you to dinner.
Yeah.